Hey guys, in this video, I'll show you how to create a recency personalization waterfall inside of clay.com for each individual prospect that you're sending an email to for as little as 0.005 per row. Now, exactly throughout this video, I'm going to show you step by step how you can build out a template that looks something like this. And all we basically need to do is import a bunch of leads into this list. So for instance, I'm just going to showcase to you the final outcome over here. So we'll have a list with a bunch of people's names, their LinkedIn profiles, their company links, their websites, and their company names. At that moment in time, we can just import it as a raw CSV file inside of this table. So let's do that very quickly here. And obviously, after matching all the rows, we can then click on Add to Table, Save and Run Rows. At that moment in time, as soon as this table runs, the final outcome would be something like this. So essentially, we will first of all try and identify a bunch of relevant triggers for the company. So for example, if this person is new in the role, we will send them a message that kind of mentions that. So for example, hey, I noticed you got promoted 9 months ago. Or hey, I noticed you've been in the company for over 6 years. I'm curious if you have a need for X service and so on, right? So essentially we're tying the icebreaker to the way that we can then somehow pitch the service. So in most cases, it's personalized and relevant, and at the same time, it's just a good icebreaker to have. Now, in cases when one of the icebreakers does not work, so for example, if a person has not been promoted, we move on to the next trigger. So for example, in this case, we're trying to find and scrape the latest blog by the company, and then on the basis of that, we can generate a pretty good opening line. So for example, here we're saying, hey, your company article on this conference came up on my Google search. It was useful to hear about the lease negotiation tips that you shared. Once again, this is pretty good and is pretty personalized. And I'm sure you get the idea as you can look at this table right now. So essentially we're moving from one personalized icebreaker to another. And then it's basically a waterfall whereby by the very end of it, we come up with something that's super personalized, and hopefully it's really emphasizes that we've done our research. And once again, there are a lot of different fallback options. So if personalization number 3 doesn't work, we go to number 4, number 5, number 6, and so on. And before you know it, we already are referencing the past company that they worked at and all the other cool stuff that we can do inside here as well. So once again, just to reiterate what this is all about, we showed you the waterfall already. And the reason I love this is because as soon as I implemented it inside of our agency, and as soon as I started teaching it inside of the Clay course, I noticed that the positive replies are through the roof. And these are just some positive replies that we've been receiving in the past few months. More than that, I've just launched a similar campaign last week. So you can see it's the start of February over here. And we're getting really disproportionately high positive replies. So once again, I know that this works. A lot of the time, I just want to give you an example of how this would look like. So for example, here we have a cringe, cheesy opener to the email, which reads, as you can see over here, I bet your inbox is swirling more than a sommelier at a wine tasting. And then that ties into the guy's work with Narpas Wine Brands, which is like the industry and the exact client name with who this famous lawyer worked with. And of course, this prompts a positive reply, which you can read just under here at the bottom as well. Now, essentially, now that hopefully you trust me and you understand, like, hey, we need to build something like this, let's talk about how you would go about building a similar personalization waterfall and why that is important. So most of the time, a personalization waterfall is important because the first line of the email for every prospect has to be different. It has to sort of answer the question, why me? Why now? And if we can personalize it and really pretend as if, you know, we've done 5-10 minutes of research of this prospect, they're more likely to open the email and read to the main offer that we have inside of the email. Now, more than that, after that, we need to identify not just an icebreaker, but what's the most relevant one. And we can get AI to determine on which one of the icebreakers is most appropriate. After we know this, we can then A/B test the different icebreakers as well, just to see which ones work best across the campaign, so we can double up on the most effective icebreakers. And then finally, we can create a one master template for this. So every time it's just a simple drag and drop of all the leads. And once again, after that, we can just rinse and repeat the process. And we don't need to anxiously create new prompts and templates every single time, because we will have one template that is our go-to template, regardless of what type of lead we're importing inside of the Clay table. Now, most famously, you probably heard about this recently from Eric Nowoslawski, and I'm sure he talks about these 3 components of the personalization waterfall. Essentially, the first type of personalization that we're looking at is active triggers. For example, is the person new in their role? Have they just been promoted? Has the company been just mentioned in the news in the last month? Has there been a new product launch or anything of that sort? Now, if tier 1 personalization is not applicable, we will move on to tier 2. And tier 2 is all about static triggers. So, for example, boring things like the time that a person has been in the role, or an observation from their LinkedIn profile, or a company testimonial from their website, maybe some case studies, maybe some blog posts, or something of that sort. And then if all of this fails and we cannot stumble across the right type of personalization, we'll then move on to the fallback personalizations. For example, calling out the name of their past company where they worked, and we can say something like, hey, I'm sure back in your Burger King days, you were not excited about the prospects of manually refreshing your CRM and manually populating new data into your CRM. And then you can pitch your Chrome extension that automates the process of doing that, right? More than that, we can also integrate some other cool prompts and enrichments. So, for example, cheesy openers, which I know Nick Abraham absolutely adores. So I'm just going to steal his prompt and share with you in this video how you can adapt it to this personalization waterfall. On top of that, there are a bunch of other fallback personalizations. So, for example, you can find the name of a colleague on that person's team, and you can say something like, hey, I'm sure Tim would love the idea of this specific tool that we've come up with, right? So now, assuming that you're already sold on this, I wanted to play this video. I'm not sure if you can even hear it, so I'm just going to quieten down for a second, and I'm going to play out this video for you. Worth noting as well, this explains what Eric Nowoslawski's go-to recency personalization waterfall is, and the reason that I want to show it to you now is because we're going to copy and paste it, and I'm going to show you how to do that inside of your business for as low as a fraction of a cent. So let's have a listen of what Eric's personalization system looks like right now. Right, so I'm sure you get the gist of that, and without further ado, I'm going to show you how you can copy and paste Eric Nowoslawski's waterfall in just a matter of minutes. So essentially, first of all, what we need to do is number out the enrichments. So what do we want to have as the first kind of icebreaker? What do we want to have as the second one? What do we want to have as the third one? So in this case, clearly, if we are to copy Eric directly, first thing we want to find out is the time in role. So have they been promoted? Are they new in the role? How long have they been in the company for? Right, so that's the first thing that we want to find. The second thing we would then find is the last blog post of the company. The third thing is the company news, then the cheesy opener. And I'm sure you get the idea. We can go on like this for a while. And after we understand what the step is and how we find it, we then need to generate some sort of prompt with a prefix that we can fit into a sentence. So we can tell AI, hey, go and find me this news. And then more than that, go and give me the first opening line based on this news, right? And after we do all of this stuff, we then need to understand what enrichment to use. And specifically in this case, we're going to be using OpenAI 4.0 Mini because it's super cheap. It's pretty cheap, and I'll show it to you in terms of cost right now over here if you want. So let me just go into this table, and we can see that, let's say, this personalization of the first opening line cost us 1/10 of a cent, right? And realistically, if you got a person to do this manually, you'll probably have to be paying them $10 an hour at least. So right now we're saving it's 1/100th of a cost of a human in most cases, right? And assuming you already understand the value and you want to jump straight into the deep end, and hopefully you didn't skip to that part of the video just yet, I'm just going to show you how we can get started completely from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside of Clay. I'm going to click on New Workbook, and I'm going to select the blank workbook, and we're going to then basically click on Add Blank Table, and we'll start completely from scratch, and I'm going to show you my entire logic for rebuilding this recency personalization waterfall in the next 10 minutes or so. Now, the first thing that we need to get right is, first of all, we need to name the Clay table, and then secondly, we also then need to add the input columns. And if you're new to this and you haven't seen much of my content before, the idea that I have for every single Clay table that I build is I want to keep it well structured. So we'll click on Add Column, we'll type it in text, and we'll edit the column. So we'll basically create 3 or 4 of those columns, and we'll call them inputs. Now, the input is the data that needs to enter the workflow in order to trigger the rest of the workflow to continue. So in this case, given that this is the sample data here, we need to title 5 columns as inputs. So those will be the 5 headings for the first 5 columns. So if you're following me whilst doing this, this is the first thing that I'm going to do right away. So I'm titling the first column input 1, and then I'm just going to continue doing this manually one by one. So I'm going to do input 2, and you get the idea. now that we generate all of those, one thing that I like to do with all the inputs, just to not get them confused inside of the table, is I like to basically click on the column and change the color to green so that I know that this is basically the data that has to be inputted inside of that actual table in order to actually generate the outputs. So once again, it's one of those boring tiny little details, but I'm not going to skip through all the boring stuff in order just to show you the flashy outcome. So that's the idea of this channel. And if you're new here, by the way, like subscribe at the same time. Now, if we look into the actual final output, what we would notice straight away is that there are 4 inputs, and we've just created those inputs already. And the first step of Eric's personalization waterfall is finding out when the person joined their current company. So for this one, all I'm going to do is just basically go inside of the clay table, click on Add Enrichment, type in Clayagent, and straight away I'll have the Clayagent AI Web Researcher, and I will basically change the Clayagent model over here to 4.0 mini. Once again, in this case, I'm very privileged because I have the entire prompt that's ready for me over here. So I'm just going to basically copy and paste this entire prompt. So let me just do that. And by the way, you will be getting this entire clay table right underneath wherever you're watching it. So make sure if you literally click on the description down below, you will get access to this exact template to save you the hours of refreshing and rewatching this video of me typing out this template manually. So as soon as we do that, the first prompt is basically just going to give us a rough idea of when the person joined the company, right? Now, we'll call this step 1, and we will say find out when person joined company, right? Now, for this, once again, I may not have mentioned this already, but we do need to input some sample data. So at this point, for this moment in time, I'm just going to input my own details, and I'm going to populate it with my LinkedIn profile and all of the other stuff so we can test drive this entire workflow. So behind the scenes, I've just imported a bunch of contacts into this table. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to press on play just so I get a rough idea of what the current output looks like. Now, the whole idea behind this is quite simple. What we'll do is we'll basically create a bunch of steps of those first liners, and then we'll create a conditional formula which says, oh, if first liner is empty, then fill in with the second first liner. And for that, we'll basically just click on edit column, and we'll basically input this use AI, and here we will tell it to basically go for another enrichment if the first one doesn't work in the first place. So let's see what AI comes up with here. So it says person joined Triggerfy in 2023, and he has been promoted in 2023 as well, which is great, right? This is exactly what we wanted. And on the basis of this information, we can then feed it another prompt, which once again, I'm going to copy and paste this prompt from the table here. And in this case, the whole logic behind it will be that we want to then personalize an icebreaker on the back of knowing when this person joined the company. So for this one, we'll use OpenAI again. We will then click on generate text, and we'll copy and paste the entire prompt. So here we will basically say, on the basis of this information, generate a first liner, which is appropriate, right? And then we're going to basically save and not run. And let's just see how it plays out for a couple of prospects, because I want to kind of try this out before actually launching it at scale for every individual person. So straight away, we can see over here it says, sorry you got promoted 10 months ago, you must be thinking there is a better way to ... And then obviously we can then autofill whatever, and put somehow into our sales pitch. Now, in cases where the personalization simply does not work because there is not sufficient information or something of that sort, we make sure to tell AI to say ignore if we don't have an answer to, like we can't generate a first line. So this is the idea behind it. So straight away, this is step 1, and then over here I'm going to say step 2, generate first liner, right? And then in cases where the first line is generated, I'm just going to call it opener 1, right? So let's just do that, opener 1, create the column, and happy days, we've got the column over here. And once again, we can filter out, we can use filters to exclude the ignore section, but it honestly doesn't matter at this stage. So now that we created the first opener, obviously, given it's a waterfall, we want to then go and use more enrichments so that we have some other fallback options if the first opener does not work. So in this case, we're going to scrape Google search for the latest blog by the company. And the way we'll do that is by using a tool called SerperDev. And if I remember, I might even link a video down below, but I do have a really long video explaining how to use SerperDev in order to basically scrape Google searches. So check that out on the channel as well. But essentially what we'll do here is we'll click on add enrichments, we'll type in HTTP API, we'll select the API, and at that moment in time, you probably need to watch the video on how to use Serpa. So in the meantime, I'm going to use my default template, and here it is. In simple terms, what we're going to do is mimic what you would do manually otherwise. So for example, let's say we have Trigify over here. If we were to try and find the most recent blog article for Trigify, we will likely go into Google and type in Trigify blog, right? And if we type that in, the first thing that will come up is the Trigify blog itself. So if we click on it, we can tell that this is the Trigify blog, and this is the most recent article, which is the LinkedIn prospecting book over here, right? So assuming we want to do this at scale, we would basically select the post method, and post basically means that we're pushing this Google search to SerpaDev. So we are posting it to SerpaDev to perform this Google search. This is always going to be the endpoint with SerpaDev, and this is going to be the query. So in other words, what we would search manually inside of Google if we were to do this manually. So in this case, I said includes the company name, which is Trigify blog. So once again, this is the way we would perform the Google search. We will then insert the headers to be X API key, and then content type to be application/JSON. I'm hiding my API key because I made a mistake of showcasing it last time and then someone copied it. So please don't be that kind of person. And at that moment in time, we're going to save and run all the rows, right? But if you already want to test out that this waterfall is working, we'll basically click on use AI and say only run if, and then we'll say opener 1 is empty or contains ignore. So what this will do straight away is we will only personalize second, only if the first opener is empty or if it basically contains the bad answer of ignore. Now, for the time being, I don't really care about that, so I'm just going to launch SerpaDev to perform all of these Google searches. And straight away, we can then click on organic, we can click on 0, and my bet is that, yes, over here, this is the link to the actual blog. So I'm going to title this blog link, and I'm going to click on create column. Now, if we reference back to the other clay table, which was the finished product, it's exactly the same way as what we've done here. And now, the one thing that we need to do is interpret the latest blog and personalized icebreaker on the basis of that blog. So the way we'll do that is we will basically go on add enrichment, we'll type in ChatGPT, we'll click on generate text, we'll go on 4.0 mini again, and we're going to copy and paste the prompt, which you already have, hopefully, in the template down below underneath the video, wherever you're watching it. What we're saying is grab all the info from the blog, and then we give it the link that we just scraped, and then follow my prefix to generate a first liner. So we basically say, hey, follow my, like literally say this in the output, right? And then at that moment in time, we're going to basically click on save and run. And what we should start seeing is this running, hopefully, in the background. So let's see. And in this case, you can see that basically it starts generating opening lines. So in this case, for example, this looks pretty good. It says, hey, your company article on gold transport came up. My Google search, it was useful to learn about the arbitrage opportunity due to the price gap between London and New York. Once again, not the best of first liners out there, but if it's AI generated, we'll give it its credits. And once again, in this case, we will then grab the response, we'll add it as a column, and we'll call this 2, right? So once again, I could tidy up the columns over here just to say, okay, this is like step 2, step 3, perform Google search, and I'm sure I will do that by the end of it, but I really want to kind of fast track your journey throughout this. So I'm just going to walk you through a couple of other enrichments that we'll go through in order to generate this master recency waterfall. And then the next thing that we want to do is we've just scraped the latest blog. We can do exactly the same thing for company news, but I don't really want to do that, so I'm going to stay away from it. And as a last one, we might as well do something else, which is, for example, generating a cheesy opener based on a company description, because a lot of the time you will have the company SEO description and you just want to generate some sort of opening line based on that, right? So the way we'll do that is, once again, first of all, you will use SerpaDev. So you'll click on add enrichment, you'll type in HTTP API, you will select that. We are going to basically just do a search for the company. So once again, we'll just search the company name, and we can search the company website. So let's just search the company website, because hopefully that's the first thing that will come up with a Google search, right? So that moment in time, we're going to basically select all of those to run. And what you should start seeing in front of you right now is basically every single one of those websites right in front of you. So the organic here, it gives us the company website, but straight away it gives us this snippet, and this snippet is basically the SEO description. So we'll rename this to SEO description, description. We'll create the column. And essentially what we would then want to do is generate cheesy opener based on that. So the way we'll do that is by copying and pasting the cheesy opener prompt. So I'm just going to click on add enrichment. I'm going to type in ChatGPT, generate text. I'm going to copy and paste the entire prompt. I'm going to select the company description at the end, which is just the SEO description. And I'm going to save and run all the 11 rows. Now, in the meantime, what I would recommend is just to rename all of those because they're a complete mess. In this case, let's just take Triggerify as an example here. So this is their SEO descriptions. They basically help with social engagement and sales signals. And this is the kind of cheesy opener that you can expect to send them, which is, hey, I bet your inbox is more packed than a social media's influencer comment section. So I'll like and reply just as fast. So once again, it's cringe. It's pretty bad, but I would basically just label this opener 3 and move on with my life. Now, by this point in time, you probably already understand how to build a personalization waterfall, but you are probably thinking, hey, where the hell is this video going? So I'll give you the TLDR summary behind this. The first key thing is just to map out what specific steps you want to kind of A/B test and what are all the steps that you want to carry out inside of this workflow. As soon as you do that, you will basically have opener 1 and opener 2. And in this case, you only need to generate opener 2 if opener 1 was not already generated. So if that's the case, all you will have to do is go on any enrichment after the first opener, and you will click on, and at the bottom, you will say, only run if opener 1 is empty or contains ignore, right? The logic behind it is to basically not waste credits on rerunning the same prospect opening line. So instead, you're going to find you're going to put the best enrichments first, and then you're going to basically set a conditional rule for all the future enrichments not to search up for that thing. And you're going to tell AI to say ignoring the output if they don't think that they can pull off this specific enrichment for you. So in simple terms, if we go into this table here, which is the final output, see that the first step takes place, the second step takes place, but then run condition is not met because of the conditional formula in cases where we already generated the first line of an email. So that's the exact reason why I would recommend basically just setting conditional rules. And that way you can just continue and go through all of these different steps, which obviously I can cover in probably an hour-long video, but realistically not many people are really going to watch that to the full extent. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this personalization waterfall template underneath the video. And by now, hopefully you understand the end-to-end logic for how to pull this workflow off yourself. And more than that, if you want to get some of the freebies that I mentioned here, so the exact templates, 10 first liners, and more over 20 minutes of me just talking about building out a waterfall completely from scratch, then by all means, all you need to do is either scan this QR code if you're on your phone right now, or alternatively, what you can do is basically just opt into the form that's underneath the video wherever you're watching it. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions on that, realistically, you can, after this video, you should be able to steal anyone's waterfall, assuming you have the templates and assuming you have the right enrichments and you map out the steps before entering the clay sheets, which is the one thing that I recommend every single time. Now, of course, if it's the first time that you heard about all of this fun stuff inside of Clay, and if it seems a bit too technical for you, by all means, go check out unlockclay.com, where I teach you how to go from a complete beginner all the way to advanced at clay.com at a super ridiculously low, affordable price on a money-back guarantee. And I'm not going to pitch it to you any further because I'm sure you will get a lot of value just by downloading the template and seeing this play out for yourself and hopefully getting a lot more positive replies. So go head over to unlockclay.com if you're interested in finding out a bit more about that. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.